Hello there, my name is Jessica Bean and today we're going to be talking about clinical trials. What are the most memorable moments in your life? We all have them. The ones that are not just notable events, but the ones that are so pivotal that when you close your eyes, you can see the scene. You can smell the smell. You can tell me what music was playing. For me, one of those moments in my life was the 30th of June, 2013. I actually consider it my second birthday. I can tell you what I wore that day, what I ate for breakfast. It was the day that I attended my first clinical trial visit for the therapy that changed my future. That day followed years of planning, years of heartbreak, and what equates to years spent in hospital. That moment felt like stepping into my future. I'm a cystic fibrosis and diabetes patient, and I'm alive today because of clinical trials. Each one of them, and the innovation that has been created because of it, has paved the way to the future. A future that is far beyond the one that my parents were given upon my diagnosis over 30 years ago. In 2013, I experienced one of life's other memorable moments when I married my high school sweetheart. It was a beautiful day, the kind of beautiful that little girls dream of. But underneath my big, beautiful dress, my heart was breaking. I knew that we probably wouldn't get the happier ever after that we promised each other in our vows, and our life was far more in sickness than it was in health. But I wanted to make that day so perfect that even if my husband didn't have me, he would have that day to treasure forever. For 4 years, we'd fought the reality that I would need a double lung transplant. We had done everything that we possibly could to keep me breathing through my own lungs for as long as possible. A transplant just didn't feel like the right treatment pathway for me, even though I was very aware of the alternative. But on my wedding day, I carried the heaviness that we were no longer winning, that we no longer had anything left to throw at the beast. 2 years earlier, I had been declined enrollment for clinical trials, a day that I also remember very clearly. I remember the phone call that I received from my doctor who had treated me since I transitioned to adult care at 16. He was evasive and dancing around the point of the phone call. I remember looking out to the appropriately stormy afternoon, and I felt like I had to reassure him that I'd be okay, even though I don't think I knew that I would be. I'd watched the treatment come through the pipeline. I was hesitant at first. Could this really be the type of treatment people had been telling me about my entire life? I also watched patients with a different gene mutation to me experience a similar type of therapy. I'd read about their experiences with hope, anticipation, but then I'd recoil in an almost self-protection because as an advanced disease stage patient, it seemed so close, yet so far away. That was very much the feeling that I had sinking deep into my soul as the doctor told me those words on that rainy afternoon. In CF care, there'd never been a type of treatment that worked in this way. A type of treatment that didn't just patch upon patch of our symptoms, but changed our genes. Being declined for that clinical trial was a type of grief that I couldn't have anticipated and that very few people understand, but I didn't know when I might be able to access that treatment, if I might be able to access that treatment. And so the only thing for me to do was to pick myself up and keeping myself alive in the only ways that I knew how. Lots of hours of treatments, very, very tight routines of dietary needs and exercise every single day, and hospital admissions. Lots and lots of hospital admissions. We didn't forget about the clinical trial, but the reality of living with CF consumed us, and we just had to keep moving forward. In Australia, clinical trials are not just a pathway for patients to contribute to the creation of future treatments, but also an important pathway to be able to access a treatment earlier than it would otherwise be available. For patients like me, patients who are at more advanced stage disease, that option can be life-saving. We know the risks, we know that there are certainly no guarantees, and we know the uncertainties, but they still provide us so much hope. An option not to give up. Following the wedding, we didn't go on a honeymoon. Instead, we went to hospital where I became the sickest that I've ever been. It should have been the happiest time of our lives, but it wasn't. I was tired. My spirit was tired. That was until a little glimmer of hope appeared. The words recruiting phase 3 appeared online next to the therapy that I'd been declined for previously. It gave me a little glimmer of belief that maybe there was still the possibility of a future, the future that I so desperately wanted. I just had to somehow stabilize my health. I don't think that I have ever worked so hard for anything in my life than I did to try and get onto that clinical trial. The clinical stability criteria seemed almost an impossibility for me at that time, but I had to believe. I had to have faith that I could be a suitable candidate and that my team would believe that I would be too. I became crazy lady compliant with every one of my over 20 medications, anything that would give me that edge, anything that would ensure that I was stable. I took them at the right moment of the day. I filled my body with nourishing food. I exercised. I did all of my breathing treatments, and I actually locked myself away from the world for fear of catching a cold or a virus. And it paid off. I was granted a screening visit. A screening visit that was the next step towards a brighter future. I remember in the month leading up to that visit, every morning I would start the day by taking a breath, feeling into my body for anything that might make me ineligible. And when there was no symptom there, I'd feel this rush of relief wash over me. Another day, another opportunity. I still don't know how I found that strength at that time in my life when I was so sick. But I'm so proud of that girl who had strength, courage, and commitment to keep going even in the hardest moments. The girl that helped build the life that I have today. As I walked into the hospital that day, 30th of June 2013, every tough moment, every challenge, every time that I'd picked myself up felt worth it. The hope that I felt that day elevated me, elevated my sick, aching body, and it felt like my future was about to get bigger. I can't describe the feeling of walking away from the hospital, holding boxes of the pills that could be the pills that you've waited your entire life for. Boxes that contain little pills that could create big dreams. And in the days, the weeks, the months, and the years following that visit, my life changed in ways that I couldn't have even imagined. It wasn't about how it changed my life clinically, but how those pills created meaning, purpose, value in my life. Being able to wake up in the morning and not be consumed by a violent coughing fit so hard that I'd vomit. Being able to talk to my family on the phone for as long as I wanted without being uncomfortable or exhausted. Being able to go and see friends for a coffee date and not have to plan days to recover afterwards. Being able to help around the house, contribute, feel meaningful, not just spend days taking care of myself. And then those things became bigger things. Things like being able to think about a career, about doing the things that make life purposeful. And then those things became the unimaginable things. Things like my husband returning to work and being able to plan travels. Things that just had never felt possible. The privilege that I was granted in being the one chosen to enroll in that clinical trial is what has made me an advocate. It could so easily not have been me. From the time I started the trial to the time of reimbursement of the medicine in Australia was over 5 years. When I commenced the trial, I had a CF friend whose life and clinical circumstances were oddly similar to mine. She missed out on the trial though. And a few months later, she received an urgent double lung transplant. Thankfully, she's doing really well. A few months after I started the trial, my husband met a young man at a running event. His wife also had CF and she too had just undergone a double lung transplant after missing out on a clinical trial. She died less than 12 months later from post-transplant complications. Regardless of the role that you play in the clinical trial space, there are patients just like me, who are waiting and praying for the treatment that you're working on right now. You will probably never get to meet them, and they'll probably never know your name, but you are creating their future. Maybe it's not a cure, maybe it's not the treatment, but it will still have an impact. It will still be the next stepping stone for them. It will still create hope. This clinical trials day, when the whole world can appreciate the impact that clinical trials have in getting treatments to market, we should celebrate. We should celebrate the impact that clinical trials have in creating brighter futures. Long after COVID is no longer the world's focus, there will still be patients waiting for the treatments that will give them back a little bit more normality in their lives. I thank you for your dedication to those patients. I thank you for ensuring that there is a bigger vision for their life, a bigger vision than they could ever imagine on their own. And your commitment to ensuring that more patients will be able to have that moment, that memorable, life-changing moment where they knew their whole future was going to be a little bigger and a little brighter.